So welcome everyone. My name is Joni Parsons and I'm founder of Rebel 11. It's so nice to have you join us in our community today. We're so thrilled to have you. So it's that time of year, and as you look out my window, you can see how gray it is here in Seattle. It's dark, it's rainy, it's gray, 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 it's gloomy. It's time to come inside and escape the weather. So how did that description make you feel? So what if there was a way to change our language and mindset to embrace fall and winter, and more importantly, to use that mindset and mindset science to learn powerful lessons that can impact our well-being throughout the year? I'm ready. Are you? I'm so thrilled to welcome Kari Liebowitz today. Kari is a health psychologist, speaker, and writer. She received her PhD in social psychology from Stanford University, served as a US-Norway Fulbright Scholar, wow, and taught the Mindset Matters Stanford Continuing Studies Course. Say that quickly. You can't.
That's a
Very
tongue twister.
fast. Her writing on the power of wintertime mindset has appeared in the Atlantic, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so many others. And let's just add that she has just written this fabulous, fabulous book. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it. How to Winter, Harness Your Mindset to Thrive on Cold, Dark, or Difficult Days. Love this book. Welcome, Kari. It's so great to have you today.
It's great to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for joining and taking time out of your day to be here with us.
Yes, and so before we get into our interview with Kari today, I thought it would be great if you would all finish this sentence. Winter is ... So if you would put in the chat, what does winter mean to you? So winter is, it's a really long sentence. Winter is what? Depressing.
CP coming in right away with depressing.
Coming right in, cold, dark.
Lonely, wet.
Festive and cold, depressing, cold. Winter is a time to relax. Winter is a season. It is a season. That's very good. It's miserable. Wow. So we have some
I have my work
darkness
cut
out
out
there.
for me
Yes,
today.
you do.
Definitely. I can
I
see why
think
we're
your
here.
work is very needed, Kari. Cold, cold, cold. So many different answers that aren't definite or not necessarily in the most positive of light. It's a time for hibernation. I agree. Hunker down and wait for spring. So, Kari, let's talk about you for a little bit. I think what's so funny and kind of a little bit humorous about you is that you didn't grow up loving winter at all. So how did we get from there to you really spending your life's work on talking about winter?
Yeah, I like to call myself a reformed winter hater. So I grew up in New Jersey. So shout out to the other New Jerseyan in the chat, at the Jersey Shore specifically. So I grew up in a beach town, and I grew up in a culture and a town and a community where summer was king, and the things we love to do, going to the beach, hanging out at the boardwalk, outdoor concerts, getting ice cream, were all summer activities. And winter was a really hard time for me. I really hated the feeling of being cold. I really struggled to wake up, especially for school in the morning in the darkness. My little brother will tell you that I threatened to make him late every day by telling him that if he didn't go outside and preheat my car for us to drive to school, that then we would just have to wait and that he would be late. And so I had all sorts of these, coping mechanisms. And I went to college at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, in part because I was fleeing the winter and looking for warmer weather. And then, to be perfectly honest with you all, I sort of came into the study of winter a little bit by accident. So in college, I was studying psychology. I became really interested in how to help people thrive, how to help people flourish, what does it mean to live a good life. And I was looking for an adventure and some research experience, and I found the work of a man named Jar Vitterso, who is a professor of psychology in Norway, and he's a world-leading expert in the study of human happiness. So he studies psychological well-being and meaning and personal growth and what does it mean to live a rich life. And when I wrote to him to suggest that we work on a research collaboration together, he sort of offhandedly mentioned that he was at the northernmost university in the world, the University of Tromsø, which, spoiler alert, is where I ended up moving and where all of my research on winter began. But I sort of didn't intend to go into it studying winter. I was really interested in how do we help people thrive? How do we help people live a good life? And then I thought it was really interesting that this guy who is a world expert on human happiness lives so far north that in the town he lives in, the sun doesn't rise for 2 months in the winter. And so I sort of was like, oh, that's a really interesting and unusual climate. I was looking at it with all of my sort of American and New Jerseyan biases against the winter of winter must be depressing. And so I really wanted to learn more about that. And that was how all of this started for me.
I love that story so much. And what I love, and we talked about this a lot on Rebel 11, is that nexus point that made you take a different path than you would have ever thought you would. Like some door opens and you walk through it and all of a sudden you're studying winter. So you've spent
completely unpredictable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you walk through that. And then here we are talking about this book and how to survive winter with a wonderful mindset, which we're going to be talking about in a minute. So you've traveled to really all of the darkest, coldest places on the planet. What are some of the things that you've taken away from that experience?
Yeah, so I spent this year actually living in Tromsø, Norway, doing this research on winter. But then in the process of writing the book, I traveled, as you mentioned, to lots of other cold, dark, wintry places to experience different kinds of winter, from Canada to the coast of Scotland to Japan, to see how people embrace the season. And I found that there's really no one size fits all approach to enjoying winter. I think every place and every culture has ways that they embrace the winter. Even if that's not the dominant view in the culture, you can almost always find something somewhere that people are doing to celebrate the winter. And so it left me with this sort of smorgasbord of approaches and strategies that we can use wherever we live to enjoy the season a little bit more. But I would say the common through line of all of the strategies for enjoying winter and all of the things I saw in all of these different places are seeing winter as an opportunity. I think when we struggle with winter, we so often are focused on the limitations of winter, the things that it makes more challenging or more difficult for us. And I think the practices that help us enjoy winter, whether that's making it cozy inside, lighting candles, or getting out and noticing nature, or going to the sauna, all of those things look at the conditions of winter and say, what is this an opportunity for? What is the darkness an opportunity for? What is the cold an opportunity for? What is a slowed down season an opportunity for? And I think that is really the North Star of all of these strategies that you could use to enjoy winter.
Well, and you know, one of the things that I think is so interesting is we've been told as a society, for the most part, that fall is rainy and gloomy, and winter is you just come inside and you hunker down. And, you know, you have a quote in the book about, you know, how the weathermen say it's like, come on, you know, you got to go inside. Or like even today in the Seattle news, it says there might be a glimpse, you know, of sun before it starts raining again. And so all of this negative talk about winter and fall it's just a part of kind of who we are. So what is exciting is that we can change that mindset. But I think that before we get started talking about how to embrace this time of year. I think it's really important to note that many people have a hard time during this year. And seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a common diagnosis for having the blues. During winter, you get all of these advertisements right now for getting a SAD light and making sure you have light. But what does your research show about seasonal affective disorder?
Yeah, so seasonal affective disorder is really interesting because it's a relatively rare mental illness, but I think in our good intentions of trying to help people who suffer from seasonal affective disorder, it's taken on this outsized role in our culture, where at this time of year in the fall, there's tons of articles warning you about seasonal affective disorder and warning you to get a sad lamp and warning you about all of these things. And I think it both creates and reinforces this narrative that winter is inherently depressing. Now, the thing that I think is really important to understand about seasonal affective disorder is that the way that psychologists and clinicians understand it today is as a subtype of clinical depression. So, in order to be diagnosed with winter depression or seasonal affective disorder, you first have to meet the threshold for clinical depression. You first
Wow.
have to be clinically depressed, and then we can look for this sort of seasonally recurring pattern. And I think that's really important because one, it highlights, I think, the seriousness of seasonal affective disorder. If you have that and if you struggle with that, that is reason to talk to a doctor, maybe consider taking antidepressants, really treating it as seriously as clinical depression, which it is. But I think
Mhm.
another thing that does is help us see that this sort of popular culture narrative of people saying, oh yeah, I definitely have winter depression, I definitely have seasonal affective disorder, is not always accurate, and in my view is not always helpful. So I have a lot of people in my line of work who say this to me, who say I have winter depression, and they are not usually people who would also say to me I have clinical depression. A few of them are, and
Interesting.
then that
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, yes, but I think we think that the threshold for seasonal affective disorder is lower than that for clinical depression when it's not. Now, where is this coming from of people wanting to sort of self diagnose with winter depression? I think it comes from this feeling that winter does affect us in a very real way. That when we get into this time of year, after the clocks change, as we go into the deep dark of winter, as we get into January, as the holidays are over, we're feeling the effects of winter on our energy, on our mood, on our desire to socialize, on our productivity. And so, because we have this broad cultural narrative of seasonal affective disorder, that's sort of top of mind of people of saying, oh, why do I feel this way? I must be depressed.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a different way we can look at this feeling and we can say these feelings are actually quite natural. So if you look at every other living thing on the planet, plant or animal, they all change their behavior in some way in the winter,
This time of
which
year, right?
exactly, which
Mhm.
sounds obvious when you say it, but even until I was writing the book, I hadn't really put it like that. And
But
then,
I think it also gives us some grace to say that it's like the
yes,
whole animal kingdom and the plant kingdom are doing the exact same thing we are. And I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
right. No, no worries. Yeah, exactly. And so I think if you feel more tired or less motivated or less energetic, instead of saying this is a sign of depression, you can say this is a natural response to being a human animal on a planet and the world around me. And then you can, I think, go into a more helpful approach of saying, what does this mean I need, right? Can winter be an opportunity for me to slow down and rest more and engage in restorative activities or socialize in a different way or exercise in a different way or work in a different way? And I think that for the vast majority of people is going to be a lot more of an adaptive and useful response than just assuming that we're depressed and that there's not that much we can do about it except, sit in front of a light box 30
Yeah.
minutes a day.
So how do we begin to change our experience with winter? So we've now identified this opportunity for grace, right? That it's okay to feel all of those things that you just talked about. But what are some other ways? I mean, let's just talk about mindset. I think that This book is so powerful because not only can we change our mindset during winter, as Kari has been talking about, but these are tools, and we'll be talking about some things that you can put in your toolkit shortly, but these are tools that you can use throughout the year. But let's focus on winter right now.
Absolutely. So yeah, I really am, I would say, a mindset researcher by
Yes,
training.
you
I spent
are.
6 years at Stanford studying mindsets. Palo Alto, California, not actually the best place to study winter, but
Winter,
it was a
no, not at
great
all.
place to
Even though
develop
they
a
think
lot
they
of.
have one.
Exactly. It was a great place to really dive into the science of mindsets and how they work. So I think, when we're starting at a basic level, the first thing is to recognize that we have mindsets. We have mindsets about lots of things. And these are these sort of broad assumptions we make about things in the world, right? Winter is limiting, winter is full of opportunity. Stress is harmful for our health and well being, stress is helpful for our health and well being. Our intelligence can grow with effort. Our intelligence is fixed and can't be changed. These are some of the mindsets that have been studied by psychologists. And I think the thing that is really interesting about mindsets is that they are often operating at an unconscious level. So we all have them.
Mhm.
You all
Yeah.
have a mindset about winter. It's not possible to not have one. And it might be influencing what you're paying attention to during the season, how you're feeling in response to what you're paying attention to, what you're motivated to do, then your behavior, and then as a result, your well being. And we know from research on these broad mindsets that mindsets are uniquely likely to go overlooked when we're in something that our mindset is about all the time. So, winter, for example, is a really good example because when it's winter, you're in it all the time. And so you never really have that time away to realize how your mindset is impacting you. Now, maybe if you go on a warm weather vacation or something, you might have that experience of, oh, here's how I feel different in this different climate. But I think most of the time, our mindsets are influencing our day to day feelings and emotions and behaviors outside of our awareness. So the first step is
Absolutely.
very basic and is very easy. And check, check, check for all of you here. Just understand that you have a mindset about winter, and then you can
Yes.
start noticing and paying attention to that mindset. And that's really the first step on the path to cultivating a mindset that feels adaptive and useful for you.
So thank you for that. I think, having grown up here in the Pacific Northwest, I kind of appreciate this time of year, to slow down and to really start to notice like the intricacies of nature on my walk during, that everything's kind of sleepy and then slowly watching, the season change. And I mean, it's been a gift, but, after 90 days straight of darkness here in Seattle, at one point, I'm like, when I got away, I'm like, wow, there's a huge mindset shift when I saw the sun. But anyway, I digress. So I want to talk to you a little bit. You've talked about all of your travels, but something that's been in the news a lot over the course of the last couple of years, and particularly during our COVID years, was the Nordic philosophy of both friluftsliv and hygge.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
if I know some people probably aren't familiar with those terms, but will you talk a little bit about these Nordic philosophies and how they've inspired your work?
Sure, yeah, of course. So friluftsliv is a Norwegian cultural concept. Directly translated, it means open air life. And it's sort of this cultural principle about spending time outdoors in all weather and connecting with nature. And in Norway, it's almost hard to overstate how much it permeates the culture in Norway. It's something that's taught in schools. It's something that is protected in the laws in Norway. They have what are called right to roam laws that give anyone the right to hike and camp and fish and swim on all land, regardless of
It's
whether it's
amazing.
public or private land. There's rules
Mhm.
you have to be a certain amount of way from inhabited dwellings while you're camping, yada yada. But like really this idea that land and nature belongs to everyone, and that goes along with a really comprehensive outdoor education that I think allows many Norwegians to both know how to dress properly. Yes, Lisa saying in the chat, there's no bad
Yes.
weather, only bad clothing, which is an iconic saying in Norway and throughout Scandinavia, right? This idea that you can fortify yourself against the weather to go outside and enjoy it. And also a lot of practical safety things, right? For going outside and hiking in the snow and camping in the snow and doing these outdoor recreation activities in all weather. But I think even if you didn't grow up like that and you're not a, Norwegian mountaineer skier, which I am not, you can really take inspiration from this idea that cold, wet, dark are not good reasons to not get outside, and that connecting with nature and going outside all year round is a really powerful antidote to the winter blues, and a really well proven practice for health and well-being. So free lip sleeve is really about getting outside, which really sort of exploded in popularity during COVID, when of course we couldn't do things indoors and we were social distancing.
Yes.
And then hygge is a Danish word that roughly translated means cozy. The Norwegian counterpart is kuslig. And this has also exploded in part thanks to Make Wicking's beautiful book, The Little Book of Hygge. And it's really about making things cozy indoors. It often, I think, gets a little bit flattened into aesthetics and stuff, right? Like, you got to buy the candles, you got to buy the fuzzy blankets, you got to buy the this, you got to buy the that. And the stuff, your environment influences your mood and your feelings and your mindset. But really, hygge is a feeling, not an aesthetic. And it's this feeling of, for me, it's that feeling of Friday night when I finish my to-do list, make my plan for next week, and close my email. And I'm like, okay, now I'm just going to relax, that feeling. Or I sometimes compare it to sort of the days between Christmas and New Year's, if you are fortunate enough to not be working during that time, right? This feeling of there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to be, there's nothing to do. I can just sort of be content and at ease. And I think that that is a feeling that Scandinavians are really good at cultivating in the wintertime, with low lights and candles. And someone in the chat who had a positive spin on winter said, winter is a time to read. Another person said, winter is a time to relax. Those things are sort of this embodiment of hygge, of having that cozy, relaxed time, not always, but usually in the privacy of a home, or maybe a cabin or something, where you're really feeling at ease. And so I think, both of these concepts have certainly influenced my work, in that I think that they are really interesting and important strategies for embracing winter. It's also, for me, really an interesting demonstration of the power of language, because having special words for these things, I think, gives them more heft and more weight. And this idea of, okay, I'm just gonna stay, it's Friday night, I'm not gonna do anything, I'm just gonna stay home and be a couch potato and watch TV, doesn't necessarily feel that meaningful. But being like, oh, I'm gonna have a hygge night where I'm sitting at home in front of the TV, has a totally different feel to it. And I think that's part of their popularity, is having this special label for these things.
Well, that and that people in Scandinavia grew up with that mindset. And so it's embraced in a different way than it is, say, here in the US or other places in the world. So let's talk about how we embrace the winter months. And I think your conversation, or the topic of the power of language, is so important. And this is something that is not just important during this time, but how we talk about things all throughout the year is so important. But let's focus here on the power of language. And you just talked about those two words, but how else do you think that we should use language to make our experience during winter better?
Yeah, so when we think about shaping our mindsets work in this sort of bi-directional way, right? Where your mindset influences your attention and your emotions and your motivation and your behavior. And so you can change your mindset to change these things. but you can also change these things to change your mindset. And sometimes it's almost easier to reverse engineer it. And so I think the words that we say are really powerful. When we say something out loud over and over again, whether that's about ourselves or our relationships or our job or the season, that deepens and creates the narrative that we hold on to about these things. And unfortunately for winter, we love to complain about winter weather. And, this comes from a good place, right? You're at the coffee shop or you're at the grocery store and you're making small talk, and it's easy to make small talk about winter weather. And it's easy to do that by complaining a little bit. And, listen, I'm a Jew from New Jersey. I love to kvetch. So, like, there is room for complaining. But I think that the idea of purposely changing our language a little bit can be really powerful. And so, what I often ask people to do in my classes and workshops is to commit to making winter positive small talk. So, sometimes this can be a really subtle shift of, instead of coming inside and being like, oh, it's so horrible out, being like, oh, it feels so good in here, right?
What a
The
difference, just
What
that little.
difference that feels
Mhm.
like, right? Or, we're so quick to comment on a rainy day, but on a cold, wintry day when the sun is out, saying, oh, it's so beautiful and crisp, and helping sort of create the narrative that cold weather can be gorgeous. It's these little things where, like, you don't have to be annoying about it. It's a fine line to walk. But this idea that we can use our language to direct our attention in meaningful ways, and that actually helps us shift our mindsets. I'll give you one other example, which is one of my favorite things that I found while researching the book, of how our language matters. So the Sami are the indigenous people of Northern Europe, of Northern Scandinavia, Norway, what is now Norway, Finland, Sweden. And in addition to the 4 seasons that we're most familiar with, winter, spring, summer, and fall, traditionally the Sami have 4 bridge seasons for 8 seasons total. So they have spring, summer, summer, fall, winter, and winter, spring, or spring, winter. And so for them, winter actually has 3 parts. There's autumn, winter, winter, and spring, winter, or winter, spring. And that idea of separating winter into 3 parts with your language, I think, is actually really meaningful, because
Yes.
this time of year, as we're sort of still feeling fall, but the clocks have changed, it's getting darker, calling this winter or thinking of it as winter, it's so different than the winter of late February, when
Yes.
the days are getting longer again and maybe we're starting to feel tired of the winter. And so for me, this idea of separating winter into 3 parts, I think, can especially help in spring, winter, when a lot of people are like, that first warm day of spring, my husband and I call it delusional spring, where, like, you
Oh,
get one warm day and then you put
magic.
the jackets away and then you're like,
Open
it's
the doors.
spring. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the next day it's cold again and you're outside without a jacket, and, like, it's delusional spring because it's still cold. But that's spring, winter, right? It's neither full winter nor spring. And so this idea that we can use words to deliberately draw our attention to different components of winter, different aspects of how the season is changing, I think, is also really powerful, and is an example of how our language helps us see the world differently.
Yes, I love that so much. So you touched on this a little bit already, but embrace the dark and get in the mood. Like, I have my candle right here. It's dark outside and I have my candle.
Yes.
Just, and then I have my mug. I mean, so you did talk, about just like getting cozy. What does that feel like? How can you, like, make the mood within the home? And there's so much to that that just makes it feel different.
Totally. And I think, this is one of those ones, like, it's almost a no-brainer and it gets thrown out all the time so that it seems fluffy, right? Light some candles and then you won't be depressed in winter. And you're like, yeah, sure. Okay. But the reality is that if you light candles with the intention of transforming the meaning of the darkness, they really do take on outsized importance as a ritual, where you have this thing that a lot of people struggle with, which is the, dark mornings, the early dark evenings. And you say, okay, what is that an opportunity for? It's an opportunity to eat by candlelight, to feel cozy, to have an early movie night, to have this ambiance that you can't have when it is sunny all the time, right?
Yeah,
If you like
exactly.
Christmas lights in your town,
I love
that's a
them.
gift of winter's darkness, right? And this is one I think is really, we have people in the chat who live in LA, who live in Georgia, who live in places that might not get so frigid and cold, but it's still going to be darker in the winter. And so, how can you embrace that? And so, I think this idea of looking at the opportunity in the darkness for this cozy feeling is really powerful. And it's something you see, in Scandinavia all the time. One practice I've adopted from them is like, candles are not reserved for special occasions in my house anymore. The
That's
other
great.
day,
Yeah.
like I woke up early, I couldn't sleep, and I went down to the kitchen for my breakfast. And instead of turning the lights on, like I lit a couple candles on the table and I like ate my breakfast by candlelight. And I only lit them for 15 minutes and then I blew them out, but it took 2 seconds. I already have them out. And it really changed the feeling of being up before the sun was up. And so I think saying that you're going to incorporate this into this part of your everyday is really transformative, and is something that I think, in Scandinavia, where they embody hygge and kuschlig and this idea of making it cozy, that's something that they're looking forward to in the winter specifically. That ability to have that feeling, to have that calm, cozy darkness time that is enabled by what I call big light off, right? By
Yeah.
using low lights. And also it's counterintuitive, but having all the big lights on is actually more exhausting for your eyes. It makes the darkness outside look and feel darker by contrast. And so it makes outside seem more foreboding. It has this sort of cognitive exhaustion because there's such a difference. Whereas when you have these low lights, you're more adapted to the winter darkness. Maybe it's easier to go for an evening walk, things like that.
Nice. So let's talk about awe. And I wanted to share a little experience that I had this morning. So as I've mentioned, it's rainy and gray here. We took a walk this morning with the dogs. And we had, this time where it wasn't as rainy as it has been. And I was just like, I just am so inspired by Kari's book and this whole idea of awe. And I was looking at all the colors of fall that are still here and just really like embracing beauty this morning. And all of a sudden, like I look up in the tree and there's this beautiful little hummingbird there. And he's just sitting there and looking at me. And I just paused. I'm like, there's a hummingbird. And so we just had this moment and it was awe. It's just filled with so much awe. And beauty is around us all the time if we just notice. And one of the things that we talked about earlier this morning, that this is something that you can learn. And can you talk a little bit about the steps in which to do that?
Sure. So awe is a really interesting emotion. So the psychologists who study it say it falls somewhere between an emotion and an altered state of consciousness. So awe really shakes up our preconceptions of the world and helps us see things in new ways. And this is why awe can be a particularly powerful antidote to difficult emotions or times of stress or heartbreak or challenge, because they helps us see things differently, and it helps put our problems into perspective. It helps create what researchers call a small sense of self, which is not a bad thing. This is the feeling of,
That's a
looking
good
at
thing.
a starry sky or the vast ocean, that feeling of being part of something greater. And for a long time, researchers thought that it would be difficult to help people feel awe on purpose, right? We think of awe as something that washes over us unexpectedly. But there was a great study by Virginia Sturm and her other colleagues where they asked older adults in their 60s, 70s, and 80s to take what they called awe walks. So once every 2 weeks for 15 minutes, they instructed these participants, go out into the world and try to feel awe. So look for the little hummingbirds, look
Mhm.
for the beauty around you, look for things that make you feel inspired. And what they found was that these participants were able to feel more awe on purpose. And that led to a whole host of other positive emotions and mood boosts and increases in well being, even when they weren't walking. And for me, this is really meaningful because I think, we often think that, some people are just good at noticing the beauty in the world, and some people are just optimists, and some people are just pessimists. And it might be true that everyone has a different starting point, but it is
Mhm.
also demonstrated that this is a skill that you can build. And I think it's particularly useful to do this in the winter, when I think the prevailing narrative for those who aren't really looking is that everything is dead or dormant or in
Exactly.
hibernation. But actually, if you are walking outside in nature and paying attention, you can really see a lot more happening in winter than you might
Absolutely.
think. And
Mhm.
nature is a reliable uh, source of awe. A lot of studies use nature specifically, so that's good. But there's lots of things that, city skylines, meeting a tiny baby, listening to a great piece of music.
Absolutely.
All of those things can make us feel awe, and are things that if you're feeling a little bit down in winter specifically, or maybe in the times that we're living in more broadly, going out and seeking awe, I think is really powerful. Actually, last weekend, I was in Philadelphia, and we had a little book launch party for my close friends and family. And the passage I chose to read at the book launch party was the section of the book on awe, because I feel like in difficult times, which a lot of
Yes,
people are
yes.
feeling right now, it is
Absolutely.
a really effective and powerful practice for, helping us stay hopeful and positive.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because we all have been overwhelmed, I would say, in the last couple of weeks with all sorts of emotions. And to remember that there is beauty around us all of the time if we're open to seeing it, also inspires a different mindset, which is so important, and that we can only control certain things, and to be really focused in on that and let kind of like shed off the other things that are not serving us. But we have our ability around us to create mindset and awe. So let's talk
Absolutely. And I just
briefly.
real
Go
quick,
ahead.
I just want to shout out Richard in the chat, who's saying that they take daily awe walks to observe the changes in the season and then write them down in haikus, which is
Yes.
like a double whammy of well-being, right? You're going out and you're noticing, and then you're capturing it in some way that feels creative to you. And I think this is a really great winter practice, right? So whether it's writing poetry or taking photographs or coming home and painting or sketching something that you saw, this idea of feeling the awe and then recording it really helps it stay with you. So thanks for sharing that, Richard.
And I am the recipient of some of Richard's haiku, and I'm so
Oh,
grateful. So
I'm
thank you.
jealous.
We'll add you to the list.
Yeah, please.
So let's talk briefly, just briefly, about ritual during this time of
Mm.
year.
Yeah, so rituals, we can think of rituals, they're often defined as actions that involve an action with repetition and intention, right? And so we all have actions maybe that we repeat often, like brushing our teeth, that are not rituals, or things that we do sort of on a one-off basis, right? Maybe you celebrate someone's birthday or something, but it's not repeated. And so this idea of action, intention, and repetition, what it does is it elevates a behavior so that it takes on greater meaning than what it is, right? So when the power goes out and you have to light candles to see, not necessarily a ritual, but going around your house every day when the sun sets and lighting your candles, or sitting down at your desk and lighting your candle to start working
Every
with that
day.
intention. Exactly. I also do that. That can become a ritual. And I think these things are really powerful because they give us something to lean on, especially when the days seem to drag or we're feeling a little bit down. They help us feel that comfort and familiarity and tune us into the things that we're trying to do and feel. I also think rituals around winter are really interesting because so many of us have them around the holidays, right? So
Yeah.
many of people's favorite things about winter are they make cookies every year, or they watch the same movies every year, or they decorate every year. And these are winter rituals. We think of them only as holiday practices, but they're really winter rituals. And so if you have anything that you do around the holidays that you look forward to every year, you know how to make meaning during the dark days of winter.
Yeah.
And you can draw from that into January and February and March after the new year is over to find sort of more comfort and more meaning in the things that you're doing by yourself, with your friends, in your community, with your loved ones. And I think we need to give ourselves a little more credit for the rituals that we have and our ability to create meaning at this time of year.
Well, that's a perfect lead in, because one of the most important things that we've about your book is what the whole concept that mindset plays the vital role that in how we embrace winter, but also how we embrace life throughout the year. And as we were talking about, we had a little prep call yesterday, and we were talking about, well, this is Kari's excuse. Winter is Kari's excuse to talk about mindset and how it impacts you all of the time. So let's just dive into that for a few minutes, and then I have some questions for our audience.
Yeah, great. So I think, right, this idea that our mindset can help us during any challenging or difficult time
Mhm.
is really powerful and is really well supported. So, actually, one of, I think, the most amazing mindset studies that has come out of the lab I was part of at Stanford, the Stanford Mind and Body Lab, was led by a colleague of mine, Sean Zion, where they helped patients going through cancer treatment adopt more useful mindsets about the meaning of cancer in their lives and their ability to face treatment. And so rather than viewing cancer as catastrophic, they helped people adopt the mindset that both cancer is manageable and even that it's an opportunity to make positive life changes, connect with the things that are important with them, lean on their relationships and their social support networks. This doesn't mean we like cancer. This doesn't mean that we're happy to
Right, but
have
I thought this
cancer.
was so interesting.
Right. And so,
Mhm.
but it's given this reality, given this thing that you cannot control, how can your mindset help you move through it? And that study found that helping these patients adopt these mindsets improved their functioning, it reduced their distress in response to cancer treatment symptoms, it increased their well-being, it had extremely positive effects. And that study is amazing. I think it's, of course, really challenging to change your mindset about something as serious and difficult as cancer.
Dramatic. Yeah,
And
that's dramatic.
so, what I like about winter mindsets is I think it feels maybe a little more friendly, a little more accessible. You can try it out. But what it really is a practice in saying, okay, here is this thing I cannot control. I cannot control the weather. I cannot control when the sun rises or sets. I cannot control whether the groundhog sees his shadow and spring
Right,
comes early or
exactly.
late. You know, there's all this stuff that I can't control. How can I work with those circumstances and find the opportunities there and make the best of that? And doing that is really powerful because we're all going to face unwanted things that we didn't control, right? You'll lose a loved one, you will get sick, you will get laid off, you will have to recover from surgery. All of these, some of these things will happen to all of us inevitably. And when we face them, the question is really, okay, I didn't choose this. I wouldn't choose this. I'm not happy it's happening. How can I work with the darkness? How can I harness my mindset to try to find the opportunities in this situation? And I think when we strengthen that muscle by doing it in winter, it both shows us how much is possible with our mindsets
Mhm.
and also shows us that we can do it, shows us that we have at least some agency over our experience of these challenging things. And so for me, I hope that some of these practices in the book will help inspire this kind of confidence and will help people not just in winter, but maybe in other challenging seasons of life as well.
Kari, your book is so great. And
Thank you,
there's so
Jody.
much more in the book that you will just love and take away and then you can put in your toolkit. That's one thing that we always want to talk about at Revel 11 is, how can we take this information and utilize it every day in our lives? So now I have a question for our audience. I want you to fill out this sentence. Winter is. And how do you feel differently about it now than you did 48 minutes ago? So winter is.
Let's see, guys. How
Let's
did I do?
see. An
An opportunity. Thank
opportunity.
you,
Yay.
Vicky. All right. That's my paid audience plant for the day. So, Vicky, I will be Venmoing you your fee for that.
So I just think that there's possibility. Winter is a time for warmth and opportunities to search for awe. Karen, thank you so much. Possible to get through CP. Good job. It's a challenge and an opportunity. An
Yeah.
opportunity to read and write. And one of the other things that I would just want to note that you also said in the book is, winter is a time to rest and to reflect and to think about what's ahead. It's this time to nurture ourselves, just kind of, like nature does as well. To, have this time to relax so that you can grow again in spring. And
Yeah.
something really important to remember. So what else do people
And we're
say?
seeing that an opportunity to read and write, a time to look forward to, time to dive deeply into creative pursuits,
Yes,
to
exactly.
play, time to read, plan the garden, potential to explore the self. And this is what I really love is like, it's so easy to focus on the limitations of winter, but actually some of these limitations open up other opportunities. So for
Yes,
me as a writer,
absolutely.
I have a really hard time writing in the summer. I want to be out swimming and paddleboarding and
Yep.
drinking in the park with my friends, but in the winter, that's my time to stay home and focus on my writing and focus on my work. And it's actually a blessing to have that sort of cleared out for part of the year?
Yeah. And Bonnie, I just love this one. Motivation to make an effort to find the proper clothing to spend time outdoors. I love that. And actually, Bonnie and everyone, one of my goals is to hike more often during this year and not have rain be and gloom be a deterrent. So that's one of the things that I'm going to embrace. My
I
next
love that.
question was, how can you make the winter months more enjoyable? But I think, many of you have already answered that. So if you want to put something else in the chat, that would be great. Vicky said, I love hiking in the Pacific Northwest winters. Just need some, gloves,
Yeah.
hat, raincoat. So there's just so much opportunity here and, awe, embracing awe and embracing mindset and really thinking about the words that we use, not just to describe winter, but to describe our life on a daily basis, our relationships. It's just such an important. I just don't know, Kari, I'm just so grateful for your work. And it's just such a good reminder to think about how we're living our lives, how we talk about ourselves, how we talk about others, how we are thinking. I can't say enough about this book. And again, it's How to Winter, Harness Your Mindset on to Thrive on Cold, Dark, or Difficult Days. And Kari, do you have any parting thoughts?
I mean, I think everyone has taken something different from this conversation, which is what I love so much about this work is that, like I said, it's really not one size fits all. So I hope that this inspires you to try something new this week and, see how it feels. Do it as an experiment with an open mind. If you love it, stick with it. If you don't like it, try something
Try
different. But I
something
think
new.
everyone has such good things that they've taken with them from this conversation. So I'm pleased. I feel like my work is done here. And thank you all
Yeah.
for being here. It's been really great. And it's been really great to hear everybody what they think in the chat and to get to chat with you, Joni.
Yeah, and Kari, thank you so much for joining us from Amsterdam. I know it's late there. You need to go to bed.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
again. Here's the book.
Thank you.
I highly recommend.